The widow sat on the porch step of a house that no longer belonged to her, counting $73 in singles and one wrinkled five, while her late husband's brother backed a flatbed trailer down the driveway with everything she had left in the world. The neighbors watched from behind their curtains. The pastor's wife had already mentioned kindly that the assisted living facility off Route 70 had a waiting list, but they could probably get her in by Christmas. They told her she was too old to start over. They told her grief and stubbornness were a dangerous pair at 60. But what none of them knew, not the pastor's wife, not the brother loading the rocking chair into his trailer, not even the woman herself, was that tucked between 2 pages of a wedding album she had not opened in 38 years. There was a folded piece of paper that was about to change everything. Before we go any further, if stories about quiet courage and second chances are the kind of stories that keep you company at night, take a moment now to subscribe. We tell these stories slowly the way they were meant to be told, and we tell them for people who understand that the most important things in a life are usually the ones nobody talks about until it's too late. Her name was Maren Ashby. She was 60 years old, and 3 days ago she had buried her husband. Walter Ashby had been a carpenter for 41 years. He had hands the color of weathered cedar knuckles thickened by decades of holding a hammer and a habit of humming under his breath when he was thinking. He was 62 years old when his heart stopped on a Tuesday morning in late September in the middle of measuring a stairwell for a client in Hendersonville. The client said Walter had set the tape measure down very carefully, leaned against the banister, and slid to the floor as if he were sitting down to rest. The paramedics said the same thing the paramedics always say. It was fast. He didn't suffer. As if any of that was supposed to be a comfort to the woman who had made his coffee that morning and kissed the back of his neck while he tied his boots. The funeral was on a Friday. 22 people came. Maren wore the navy dress Walter had liked, the one with the small pearl buttons up the front, and she sat in the front pew of the Methodist Church off Tunnel Road and tried the whole service to remember the very last thing he had said to her. It was something about a loose hinge on the screen door. He was going to fix it that weekend. That was the last thing, a loose hinge. Royce Ashby came to the funeral in a suit 2 sizes too small and a tie he had clearly borrowed. He stood in the back. He did not come to the graveside. Maren had not seen him in almost 4 years since the Christmas he had borrowed $300 from Walter and disappeared until February, and she did not expect to see him again. But 3 days after they put Walter in the ground, Maren heard a diesel engine pulling into the driveway of the small rental house on Sweeten Creek Road, and when she looked through the kitchen window, she saw Royce climbing out of Walter's truck, and behind him, a woman she did not recognize sitting in the passenger seat scrolling through her phone with one long pink fingernail. Royce did not knock. He walked around to the back of the house to the garage where Walter kept his tools, and he opened the door as if it were already his. She met him there with the dish towel still in her hand. "What are you doing, Royce?" He did not look at her. He was already coiling an extension cord around his elbow. "Walter owed me $5,000. I'm collecting what I can." "He never said anything about owing you money." "Well, he did. Borrowed it back in spring. Said he'd pay me when his summer jobs came in." Maren stood in the doorway of the garage watching this man she had known for 38 years lie to her face on the 3rd day after she became a widow. The garage smelled like sawdust and motor oil, and the faint, sweet smell of the cedar shavings Walter swept into a pile every Friday evening. Above the workbench, Walter's pegboard held every tool in its outline drawn in marker, so he would know if anything was missing. A drawing of order, a drawing of a life. Royce took the cordless drill. He took the table saw Walter had saved for 2 years to buy. He took the welding rig and the toolbox and the rolling cart and the air compressor. He took the carved wooden sign that said, Ashby Woodworks, that Walter had hung above the garage door the day they moved in. He carried each piece out to the trailer with the easy efficiency of a man who had been planning this for a long time. Maren did not stop him. She did not have the papers. She did not have a brother of her own. She did not have a grown son to stand in the doorway with crossed arms and tell Royce to leave. She had a kitchen towel and $73 in a coffee can, and a lease in Walter's name that the landlord had already told her very politely would not be renewed. On his last trip out, Royce paused in the doorway of the spare bedroom. The rocking chair Walter had made the summer Maren was pregnant was sitting against the wall. Walnut, hand-carved. Walter had stained it 3 times. He had rocked their daughter to sleep in that chair for 8 years before she got too big. Royce looked at it and then he looked at Maren. "I'll take this too. Hand-built. Worth something." He carried it out. Maren watched him strap it to the trailer with a yellow ratchet strap and pull the strap tight enough to leave a mark in the wood. He paused at the driver's door of the truck. He looked back at the porch where Maren was standing. He glanced at the bookshelf visible through the front window at the framed wedding photo and the worn leather Bible and the photo album with the cream-colored cover that had been on the bottom shelf since 1987. "You can keep your church stuff and your scrapbooks," he said. "Nothing in there worth the gas." He climbed in the truck. The woman in the passenger seat did not look up from her phone. The trailer pulled out of the driveway with the rocking chair on top, and Maren watched the rocker move gently from side to side with the motion of the road until they turned the corner and disappeared. She stood on the porch for a long time after the engine sound faded. The afternoon was cool. October was coming early to the mountains this year. A maple at the edge of the yard had already turned the color of a struck match, and the wind moved the leaves in a way that made a sound like a slow breath. Maren sat down on the porch step. She counted the money in her coffee can. $73, a 5 and the rest in ones. She had been saving it for a haircut. She did not cry. She had done that already in the shower the morning after Walter died with the water running, so the neighbors would not hear. She felt instead like someone had emptied her out and left only the shape of her standing on the porch. The landlord called that evening. He was a kind man, he said. He would give her until the 1st of November. That was 41 days. Maren made instant coffee in a chipped mug because Royce had taken the good ones, and she sat at the kitchen table that was now too big for the room because the chairs were gone and she did not know what to do. She was 60 years old. She had worked part-time at a laundromat for the last 6 years. 20 hours a week, $10 an hour because Walter had wanted her home in the afternoons. She had no savings beyond the coffee can. She had no car. The car was in Walter's name and the bank had already called. She had a sister in Tampa who had not spoken to her in 11 years over an argument so small Maren could not remember the shape of it now. She did not know what to do. It was past midnight when she finally got up from the table and walked to the bookshelf. She did not know what she was looking for. She thought she might read something. Walter's Bible, maybe. He had not been a man for sermons, but he had read scripture some nights at the kitchen table after she went to bed slowly, the way he read everything with his finger moving under the words. She pulled the Bible from the shelf, and next to it, tucked against the wall, was the wedding album. Cream-colored cover, gold lettering across the front. The Ashbys, August 14th, 1987. She had not opened it in over 30 years. She did not know why she had not. There were photographs in there of people who were already dead, and photographs of people she did not want to see anymore, and a photograph of Walter at 24 standing on the steps of the courthouse with a carnation in his lapel and a look on his face that she had not been able to bear looking at after the years started piling up. She carried it to the table. She set it down next to her coffee. She opened the cover, and a piece of paper folded twice slid out onto the table. She almost did not notice it. It was the color of the album page, cream against cream, and it had been folded so flat it had taken the shape of the page itself. She picked it up. She unfolded it slowly because her hands had started shaking, and she was not sure why. A deed, stamped by the Buncombe County Clerk's Office, dated May the 17th, 2017, 3 acres. Parcel 47B, Hollow Creek Road, Madison County. The name on the deed was Walter Hollis Ashby. The purchase price was $420. Maren read it 3 times. Then she read it again. The wedding album was open in front of her, a photograph of her and Walter on the courthouse steps looking up at her. And her husband had bought 3 acres of land for $420 9 years ago and had never said a word. She turned the page of the album. Behind the deed, pressed flat against the next photograph, was a second piece of paper, a hand-drawn map. Walter's handwriting. Block letters, all capitals, the way he printed every measurement, every grocery list, every note he had ever left her on the refrigerator. Asheville to Hollow Creek, 63 miles north. A town called Marshall circled twice. An arrow pointing west along a road labeled Hollow Creek Road, and a small mark with the words Parcel 47B. Maren held the map in her hand. The kitchen was very quiet. Outside, the maple leaves moved in the dark. For 9 years, every Sunday morning, Walter had kissed her on the forehead and told her he was driving up to Hot Springs to fish with an old Marine buddy named Cal. Every Sunday evening, he had come home in the dark with sawdust in his hair, which he had assumed was from the workshop, because Walter was the kind of man who could not pass a piece of wood without touching it. Every Sunday for 9 years, 468 Sundays. She did not know what was at the end of Hollow Creek Road, but Walter had been going there, and he had been building something, and he had never told her. The Greyhound out of Asheville to Marshall left at 6:15 in the morning. The ticket was $11 from Marshall. Maren walked into a small coffee shop on the main street and asked the woman behind the counter if anyone knew where Hollow Creek Road was. The woman pointed her toward a man at the corner table with a thermos and a newspaper, who said he was going that way anyway and could drop her at the turnoff. His name was Elwin Pickett. He was wearing a flannel shirt buttoned to the throat and a wool cap pulled down over silver hair. He was, she would guess, somewhere in his late 60s. He drove an old Ford pickup that smelled like pipe tobacco and wet leaves, and he did not ask her any questions until they were 3 miles out of town, the road rising up into the Blue Ridge in slow, gentle curves, the morning light just beginning to find its way down into the hollows. "You don't mind me asking," he said, "what's your business out on Hollow Creek?" "My husband owned a piece of land out there. I'm going to see it." Elwin's hands tightened on the wheel. He did not look at her. "What was your husband's name?" "Walter Ashby." The truck slowed. Not much. Just enough that Maren noticed. Elwin Pickett kept his eyes on the road. The morning light was coming through the windshield, now low and gold, the kind of mountain light that turned the air itself the color of honey. "I knew Walter," he said. "I sold him every board foot of lumber he carried up that mountain for 9 years." Maren did not answer. She could not. There was something happening in her chest that did not have a name. The truck moved forward into the morning light, and Elwin Pickett let the silence sit between them, the way a man sits in a church pew with respect. "I'm sorry for your loss, ma'am," he said after a long time. "Walter was about the finest man I ever knew." He let her out at a mailbox with the number 47B painted on the side in white block letters. The mailbox was new. The post was set straight. Walter's work, she knew that without thinking. He could not pass a crooked post without straightening it. "It's about a quarter-mile up the drive," Elwin said. "You take your time. And, ma'am, when you're ready to come back into town, you come find me at the lumber yard. I owe Walter more than he ever let me pay back, and I'd like to start making it up to his widow." He drove away. Maren stood at the mailbox in the morning light and listened to the truck go, and then there was no sound at all except the wind in the pines and a bird she could not name calling from somewhere up the ridge. She walked up the drive. It was gravel for the first 100 feet, and then it turned to packed dirt with 2 tire tracks worn into it from years of use. Pines on both sides, tall and thin, the kind that grow on a slope. The drive curved to the left, and then it climbed, and then she came out into a clearing on the side of a hill, and Maren stopped where she stood. In the middle of the clearing, on a level patch of ground that looked out across the valley toward the eastern ridges, sat a workshop. Cedar siding weathered to silver, a peaked roof with new shingles, a pair of double doors painted the color of a robin's egg, the exact pale blue Walter had asked her about one winter evening 5 or 6 years ago, holding up a paint chip and saying nothing more than, "What do you think?" She had said it was a nice color. She had not asked why. He had put the chip in his pocket, and that had been the end of the conversation. And uphill from the workshop, set back on a slight rise where the morning sun would find it first, was a house. Small, unfinished, but unmistakably a house. The frame was solid timber, real lumber, the kind a man pays extra for, because he's not building something to last 20 years. He is building something to last 100. The roof was complete dark green metal, the seams clean. 3 of the 4 walls were sheathed in plywood, and one of them, the south wall, was finished in cedar clapboard oiled to a soft brown. A front porch ran the length of the house, framed but not yet floored. No railing, no steps, just the joist exposed and a low cement footing where the steps would one day go. Maren walked toward the house slowly. Her legs were doing something she did not understand. The ground under her feet did not feel like ground. A dog came around the corner of the workshop. Medium-sized, the color of wet straw, one ear torn at the tip and the other ear standing straight up. He saw her and he stopped. He did not bark. He did not run. He just stood in the long grass and looked at her with eyes the color of river stones. "Hello?" Maren said. The dog's tail moved once low and uncertain. She walked past him to the porch. There was no door yet, just an opening framed for one. She stepped up onto the joists, careful where she set her weight, and she walked through the doorway into the house her husband had been building for 9 years, on a piece of land she had never known he owned, while every Sunday she had packed him a sandwich and told him to give her love to Cal. There was no Cal. There had never been a Cal. The inside smelled like cedar and pine and the faint, cool smell of a building that had been closed up for a few weeks. 2 bedrooms framed out, a kitchen along the back wall with cabinets already built and sanded smooth, waiting for hardware. A bathroom roughed in with PVC pipes and a clawfoot tub sitting in the middle of the floor with a tarp folded inside it. A living room with a stone fireplace, the chimney complete, the hearth laid in slate the color of a winter sky. And on the east wall of the larger bedroom, a window. Real glass, already installed. Facing the place where the morning sun would come up over the eastern ridge and find this room first every day for as long as the house stood. Maren put her hand on the windowsill. Whoever this house was for, Walter, had built it so they would wake up to the morning light. There was a workbench in the corner of the living room, a temporary one made of sawhorses and a sheet of plywood. On it sat a thermos, a coffee mug with a chipped rim, and a brown leather notebook the size of a paperback. The cover was stained with sawdust, and the corner had been worn soft from years of being shoved in and out of a back pocket. Maren picked it up. The leather was cool. Her hands were shaking again. She opened it. Walter's printing. Block letters, all capitals. The first page was dated May the 20th, 2017, 3 days after the deed. The first line said, "House for Della, starting today." Maren sat down on the plywood workbench with the notebook open in her hands, and she read the name of her daughter written in her husband's careful hand, dated 9 years and 4 months ago, and she could not breathe. Della Ashby had been 18 years old the night she walked out of the rental house on Sweeten Creek Road with a duffel bag and a slammed door. The fight had been about a boy. The fight had been about everything. The fight had been about the kind of words that a mother and a daughter say to each other only one time in a life, because once you have said them, you cannot ever say them again without remembering. Maren had stood in the kitchen and she had said something she had been trying to take back for 12 years. Della had not come home. She had not called. She had not written. Walter had searched. He had hired a man in Knoxville one summer to look. He had come back and said only that Della was alive and she was safe, and that she had asked please to be left alone. Maren had cried for 2 weeks, and then she had stopped crying because crying did not bring a daughter home. And she had told herself that her daughter would come back when she was ready. And the years had passed, and Della had not come back. And Maren had locked that grief in a room inside herself and walked past the door every day without opening it. And Walter all that time had been building. Maren turned the page of the notebook. Walter's printing filled it. Measurements, costs, lumber prices, sketches of joinery, dovetail, mortise, and tenon. And between the building notes scattered through the pages like a man speaking quietly to himself while he worked sentences that were not about the house at all. Page 4. Della always slept facing the window. East-facing bedroom, so she gets the morning light. She used to call it the wake-up color. Page 9 porch will face south so she can sit out and see the valley. 2 chairs. She will want a dog someday. She always wanted one. Page 16. Kitchen window over the sink. She always said a kitchen without a window was a sad place to stand. Page 23. Fireplace done. Slate hearth. Della was born in February. She will need a fireplace in February. Maren read until the light through the east window turned from gold to amber, to the soft rose of late afternoon. She did not eat. She did not stand up. She did not notice that the dog with the torn ear had come into the house and was lying at her feet, his chin on her shoe, watching her face. She read every page of the notebook, and she met the man she had been married to for 38 years for the first time, and she understood somewhere around page 60 that he had never stopped looking for their daughter. That every Sunday for 9 years he had driven 63 miles north into the mountains, and he had nailed and sanded and measured and joined, and he had been building a road. He had been building a road home for a girl who had been gone for 12 years in the only language he knew how to speak. She came to the last entry. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. Roof on, windows in, house dried in for winter. Spring comes. I finish the floors and the trim, and I put in the front door. Summer comes. I drive to Knoxville. I find her. I tell her the house is hers. I tell her it has always been hers. It has been time for a long time now. It is past time. Maren closed the notebook. She held it against her chest. The dog with the torn ear pressed his side against her leg. Outside the east window, the last of the day's light was going down behind the ridges, and the sky over the valley was the color of a banked fire. Walter had been driving to Knoxville. He had known where Della was. He had been 3 months from finishing. 3 months. She did not cry. She held the notebook and she sat very still on the plywood workbench in the house her husband had built for the daughter she had not seen in 12 years. And she did not cry because there was something in her chest that had grown too large and too quiet for crying. She stood up. She walked to the east window. She put her hand on the glass. Somewhere down the gravel drive, a vehicle's tires were crunching slowly toward the clearing. Headlights swept across the trees. Maren turned toward the sound. The dog at her feet stood up, hackles lifting a low sound starting in his throat. The headlights came up the rise and into the clearing, and the engine cut and a door opened, and a man's voice called out across the dusk, "Walter, Walter, you up here?" It was not a voice Maren had ever heard before, and the man calling for her husband did not yet know that her husband was dead. The voice carried up through the dusk again, closer now, and Maren heard the catch in it the second time the word was spoken. "Walter, I mean, Lord, Maren, is that you up there?" She stepped through the doorway onto the joists of the unfinished porch. The dog with the torn ear pressed close to her leg. Down at the edge of the clearing, the same Ford pickup from that morning had pulled up beside the workshop, headlights still on, and Elwyn Pickett was standing beside it with both hands held out a little from his sides, the way a man stands when he is afraid he might have frightened someone. "I'm sorry," he called up. "That just slipped out. 9 years of pulling in this drive and hollering for him. My mouth got there before my head did." "It's all right." "It surely is not. I came to see you didn't need a ride back to town tonight. Glenna at the post office said the last bus to Asheville already left, and I figured a woman alone up here on her first night ought to at least have a lantern and something hot in her belly." He lifted a paper sack from the seat of the truck. He stood at the bottom of the rise and waited. He did not come up. Maren walked down to him. The dog followed her 3 steps behind, watching the man with one ear cocked. "You don't have to come up if you don't want company," Elwyn said. "I think I'd like the company for a minute." He nodded once, and that seemed to settle something for him. He set the sack on the lower tailgate of the truck. Inside it was a thermos of coffee, 2 ham sandwiches wrapped in waxed paper, a flashlight with new batteries, a small kerosene lantern, a box of matches, and a wool blanket folded square. Walter kept a cot in the workshop. There's a propane heater in there too. He used to stay over sometimes when the work ran long. I don't know what shape any of it's in, but you won't freeze, and Bo there will hear anything that needs hearing. Bo, Walter named him. Showed up here about 3 years ago, ribs out to here, ear torn from a fight he must have lost. Walter started leaving food. 6 months on this dog wouldn't let him out of his sight. He'd carry a hammer in his mouth, follow him around the property like he had a job to do. Maren looked down at the dog. The dog looked back up at her. There was nothing in his eyes that asked anything of her. He only waited. "Did Walter ever talk to you about why he was doing it?" Elwyn took his cap off and held it. The silver of his hair caught what was left of the light. He thought for a long time before he answered. "He told me once, sitting on that stump there by the workshop, that a man can spend half his life building shelves and porch railings for strangers, and at the end of it have nothing to show that meant a thing. He said he didn't want to die that kind of carpenter." She did not answer. He did not seem to expect her to. "I'll be by in the morning," he said. "Around 7. I'll bring more coffee. And if you want to talk about anything, I'll listen. And if you want to be left alone, I'll go." He got in the truck and he turned the headlights off, and he drove down the dirt drive in the dark with only the parking lights showing the way a man drives in his own field by memory. Maren stood in the clearing with the sack at her feet. The sky above the ridges had gone the color of old iron. The first stars were out. She had never in her life seen so many stars from the place where she was standing. The lights of Asheville were 63 miles south, and the lights of Marshall were down behind the mountain, and the lights of every other house she had ever known were somewhere else. She picked up the sack. She walked to the workshop. The big robin's egg doors swung open on hinges Walter had oiled. Inside, in the beam of the flashlight, she saw the cot against the back wall made up with the folded wool blanket of its own. She saw a small camp stove on a shelf. She saw a tin of coffee. She saw a paperback Western dog-eared at Chapter 11 sitting face down beside the cot, the way Walter had always set his books down when he meant to come back to them later that evening. He had not come back to this one. Bo circled 3 times on a square of folded burlap by the cot and lay down. He had a place. He had always had a place. Maren ate one of the sandwiches sitting on the edge of the cot in the lantern light. She drank the coffee. She did not read the notebook tonight. She had read enough. She slept in her coat with the wool blanket pulled up under her chin, and at some point in the night, she felt Bo jump onto the foot of the cot and settle his weight across her ankles, and she did not push him off. In the morning, she tried to start. She did not know where to start, but she knew that standing still was a thing she could not afford. The workshop had every tool a man could want, all of it accounted for, all of it sharp. She walked through the unfinished house in daylight with the notebook open in her hand, and she made a list on a blank page in the back. Front door, porch floor, porch steps, porch railing, trim around the windows, floor in the smaller bedroom, plumbing connected, front bedroom door, kitchen sink installed, paint. She wrote the list in her own handwriting next to Walter's. Her letters were rounder than his, slower. She had not held a pencil for serious writing in a long time. She looked at the 2 hands on the same page, and she felt for one strange second like she had reached across 9 years and touched him on the shoulder. She picked the bedroom floor. It seemed the smallest of the jobs and the one least likely to hurt anyone if she got it wrong. The boards were stacked in the workshop under a tarp, heart pine. Walter had labeled the stack in marker on the end grain Della's room. He had bought the boards. He had milled them down. He had numbered them in the order he meant to lay them. Maren carried the first board into the bedroom. It was heavier than it looked. She set it against the subfloor, and she did not know what to do next. Elwin came at 7. He had 2 cups of coffee from a place in Marshall and a chocolate cake donut in a paper bag. Glenna sent the donut. She said widows shouldn't have to fix their own breakfast for at least a month. I don't know how to lay a floor. Then today's the day you learn. He did not take the hammer from her hand. He did not pick up a single board. He stood in the doorway of the bedroom, and he showed her how to read the chalk marks Walter had already made on the subfloor. He showed her how Walter had numbered the boards on the end grain so she would not have to think about which one came next. He showed her how to set the first row tight against the long wall with shims, how to nail down through the tongue at a 45-degree angle, how to use a scrap block to tap the next board into place without splintering the edge. She drove the first nail crooked. The head bent over and lay flat against the wood, and she had to pull it out with the claw of the hammer and try again. The second nail split the tongue of the board. She had to pull that board out too and shave the bad edge with a small plane Elwin pointed to on Walter's bench. By noon, she had laid 4 boards. 4. She sat back on her heels and looked at the floor, and she wanted very badly to cry. That's a good morning's work, Elwin said. 4 boards is not a good morning's work. It is for the first morning. The next will go faster. The one after will go faster again. Walter laid his first floor when he was 19, and it took him a whole weekend to do a closet. He said so himself. He left around 1. He said he had a delivery to make. He said he would come by in 2 days, not tomorrow, because she did not need a man in her doorway every morning, and she would learn faster on her own anyway. He said it gently. He said it without taking anything from her. When he was gone, Maren sat on the workshop steps with the sun on her face, and she ate the second of yesterday's sandwiches, and she watched Bo chase something invisible across the clearing. The morning light had moved up the slope, and the workshop wall behind her was warm against her back. The maple at the edge of the property was the color of a struck match. She laid 6 more boards that afternoon, none of them perfect, all of them down. The first thing came on a Tuesday. She walked back to the workshop from the well pump with a jug of water in each hand, and there on the cedar steps was a covered casserole dish still warm wrapped in a kitchen towel. Chicken and rice. A note tucked under the corner of the towel for the Ashby place. Don't worry about the dish. Set it on your porch when it's empty. No name. The next thing came on a Friday. A bundle of pale yellow cotton folded and tied with a length of jute twine sitting on the workshop steps in the morning. Curtains, 4 panels, hand-hemmed. Inside the bundle was a folded square of paper that said, "Only for the east window," made by ladies who knew Walter. We were sorry to hear. She hung them that afternoon. She stood in the bedroom, and the morning light came through the pale yellow cotton and turned the whole room the color of butter. And Maren put one hand on the windowsill, and she said her husband's name out loud for the first time since the funeral. "Walter, you should see this." The third thing came on a Sunday. A short stack of 2x4s planed and stickered, leaning against the workshop wall. 6 lengths of cedar. A small bucket of galvanized nails. No note, no name. She walked the half-mile down the road to the nearest house, a low farmhouse with a tin roof, and she knocked on the door. A woman in her late 50s answered, hair tied back, sleeves pushed up. There was a smear of flour across her forearm. "I'm Maren Ashby. I think you might have left some lumber on my porch this morning." The woman looked at her. The look was kind. The look did not give anything away. "I don't know about any lumber, ma'am, but you tell whoever did to mind their own business if it bothers you." "It doesn't bother me." "Then I wouldn't go asking too hard." Her name was Tilda Renner. She was a plumber, she said. Her husband had been a plumber. He had died 8 years ago. She had taken over the work because the work was the only thing she knew how to do that he had loved. And she said this in a flat, plain way that Maren understood at once. "Your bathroom's roughed in," Tilda said. "I drove past that piece of property for 9 years. I saw the pipes go in. Walter ran them himself, but he never connected them through to the tub. When you're ready for someone to put it together for you, I won't charge you a dime. I can't take that. You aren't taking. I'm paying. It's a different transaction." The week after the curtains, Maren walked into the post office in Marshall, and Glenna Whitfield came around the counter and hugged her without saying a word. Glenna was 72. She had silver hair that she kept in a long braid down her back, and she ran the post office and the small general store attached to it as one operation, the way her mother had done before her and her grandmother before that. She poured Maren a cup of coffee from a percolator on a side table, and she sat her down on a stool by the window. "You need work," Glenna said. "I need work. I need someone 3 afternoons a week to sort the mail and stock the shelves and make change for tourists who think a postcard ought to cost a quarter. Pay is 12 an hour. It is not much. It is more than I have. Then start Wednesday." Maren walked out of the post office that morning with a job, a tin of cookies that Glenna had pressed into her hands without explanation, and a strange new feeling in her chest that she did not yet have a word for. It was not hope. It was something quieter. It was the feeling of a small weight sliding off a shoulder she had not known was bearing it. She fell into a rhythm. Mornings at the house, afternoons at the post office, evenings reading the notebook by lantern light in the workshop with Bo across her feet, and the wind moving through the pines outside, and the moon rising over the eastern ridge in a slow, steady arc that was. She had begun to understand the same arc her bedroom window had been built to catch. She finished the bedroom floor in 9 days. She knelt in the doorway when the last board went down, and she ran the flat of her hand across the heart pine, and the wood was warm and smooth, and the grain ran like water under her palm. She slept that night on the floor. She had laid herself on a folded quilt Glenna had given her, with the pale yellow curtains breathing in and out at the window, and Bo against her side, and the morning light when it came across the floor and across her face, and woke her gently, the way a hand on the shoulder wakes someone you love. It was on a Thursday in the second week of November that she found the letters. She had been clearing the workbench in the corner of the living room. Walter had left a sliding panel in the side of the bench that she had not noticed before, set so flush with the grain that her fingernail caught on it only by accident. She slid the panel back and she found a shallow drawer she had not known was there. Inside the drawer was a leather pouch the size of a Bible. She lifted it out. She set it on the bench. She unwrapped the strap. Letters. A stack of them bound with a length of brown string. The top envelope was sealed and addressed in Walter's block printing, to Della Ashby. The lower corner of the envelope said only "not sent." Maren slid the string off the stack. She counted the envelopes. There were 138 of them. The top one was dated September of the year Della had left. The one at the bottom of the stack, the last one Walter had written, was dated 3 weeks before he died. He had written to their daughter once a month, every month for 12 years. He had never sent a single one. She opened the top envelope, the oldest one, with hands she could not get to hold still. The page inside was a single sheet of yellow legal paper folded twice. Walter's printing, short the way he wrote everything. Della, it has been 3 weeks. Your mother is not eating. I do not know how to fix this, and I do not know how to fix what your mother said. I am writing this so that one day if you come home I can tell you that not a month of this went by that we did not think of you. Dad. She set the letter down. She did not open another. She could not. She lifted the stack and she carried it to the cot in the workshop, and she set it on the small table beside the lantern. And she sat on the edge of the cot, and she put her face in her hands, and she made a small sound that she did not recognize as her own voice. Bo pressed his head against her knee. He did not move. After a long time, she lifted her head and she looked at the stack again. The very last envelope, the one Walter had written 3 weeks before he died, was the only one in the stack that had not been sealed. The flap was tucked, not glued. She pulled it open. The letter inside was longer than the others. Walter had written it in 3 different sittings, the ink color shifting from black to dark blue to black again. At the bottom of the page below his signature, he had printed an address. Della Ashby, 2841 Ridgemont Lane, Knoxville, Tennessee. He had found her. After 12 years, he had found her. He had written the address down, and he had folded it into a letter he was going to deliver in person in the summer. Maren held the letter against her chest. The lantern hissed softly. The clearing outside was quiet the way only a mountain clearing in November can be quiet, with a silence so heavy it felt like a kind of weather. The next morning, Royce Ashby's truck came up the drive. She heard it before she saw it. She was on the porch joists laying out the cedar planks Tilda had left her for the porch floor, and Bo lifted his head, and a low sound came out of his throat that she had never heard him make. The truck pulled up in front of the workshop, and Royce got out alone this time. He stood beside the truck with his hands on his hips, and he looked at the workshop, and he looked at the house, and he looked at Maren up on the porch. And his face did something that Maren had seen on his face exactly twice before, in 38 years, both times when something had been taken from him that he had decided ought to be his. "You have got to be kidding me." She did not answer. "How did you find this place?" It was in the wedding album. He walked toward the house. He stopped at the bottom of where the steps were going to go. "He bought this with what money?" $420 at a tax auction 9 years ago. And he never told anybody. He told 2 people. He told the lumberyard. He told the woman at the post office. He didn't tell his own brother. He didn't tell his own wife either, Royce. He looked up at her. There was something in his face that she had not seen there before. Not regret. Royce did not have regret, but something that might have been the shape of it. A recognition of a thing he had not seen coming. He turned in a slow circle in the clearing. He looked at the workshop. He looked at the cedar siding of the south wall. He looked at the green metal roof. He looked at the way the morning light came down between the pines and lit the back of the house from the east. "What's it worth?" "I don't know." "Don't lie to me." "I'm not lying. I don't know. I haven't asked." "Half of this is mine. He was my brother. He died without a will. He died with a will." She watched Royce's face. The thing she had seen there began to harden into something else. "You're lying. He signed it at the post office in Marshall 6 months before he died. Glenna Whitfield notarized it. 2 witnesses. It's filed with the county. Everything he owned goes to me. The house, the land, the workshop, the tools, the dog, the notebook." Royce stared up at her. He did not say anything for almost a full minute. "You'll see me again, Maren." "I imagine I will." He got in the truck. He sat there for a long time before he started the engine. Then he turned the truck in a slow, tight circle in the clearing, and he drove down the dirt drive at a speed that kicked gravel up against the trees. Maren sat down on the porch joists. Her hands were shaking. She had said the words steadily. She had not known until she said them that she could say them steadily. She put her palms flat against the cedar board beside her, and she let the steadiness travel back up her arms. Bo put his chin on her knee. She rubbed his torn ear. "That was the easy part of today," she said. "The mail came on Saturday." Glenna handed her a thin white envelope across the post office counter at the end of her shift. The envelope had Maren's name on it in a man's handwriting she did not recognize, and a return address in Knoxville, Tennessee. The street was not Ridgemont Lane. It was a different street. She did not understand why. She did not open it at the post office. She walked the 3 miles back up to the house with the envelope folded into her coat pocket and the weight of it against her ribs every step, and she did not open it when she got home either. She set it on the workbench, and she boiled a pot of water on the camp stove, and she made herself a cup of tea, and she watched the steam rise in the lantern light, and she put it off as long as she could. Then she opened it. The letter was 2 pages handwritten in blue ink on lined paper torn from a notebook. The handwriting was small and careful. It was the handwriting of a man not in a hurry. "Mrs. Ashby, my name is Corbin Hale. You do not know me. I am writing because I found a letter from your husband on my kitchen table this morning when I was going through a box my late wife kept under our bed. The letter is addressed to Della Ashby, who was my wife and who was your daughter. The letter is dated 3 weeks before I believe your husband passed away. I am very sorry to be the one to tell you, but Della passed away 4 years ago this December. Pneumonia. She was 26. I do not know how to put any of this in a letter, and I have been trying since 6 o'clock this morning to do it. There is a child. Her name is Wren. She is 8 years old. She has Della's hands, and she has, I am told, your husband's quiet way of paying attention to things. She has asked me almost every week for 2 years where her grandparents are. I did not know how to find you until your husband's letter put your name in my hand. If you are willing, please write back. We can talk. We can do whatever you can stand to do. Maren read the letter once. She read it again. She read the words, pneumonia and 4 years ago and 26. And she read them again because the words did not stop being what they were when she read them the first time. Della was dead. Della had been dead for 4 years. Walter had died not knowing. She got up from the cot. She walked to the door of the workshop. She pushed it open, and she walked out into the clearing in her socks. The grass was wet. The night was cold. The east ridge stood black against a sky full of stars she did not see. Bo came out behind her and pressed against her leg and made a low sound, but she did not hear him either. She walked to the porch of the house she had been finishing for her daughter, and she sat down on the cedar board she had laid that morning, and she put her hands flat against the wood, and she made a sound that came up out of her chest from a place she had kept locked for 12 years, and the sound went up into the dark of the pines, and the dark of the ridges, and the dark of the sky over the valley. She had a granddaughter. Walter would never know. She sat on the porch boards until the cold came up through them and into her bones. And then she sat a little longer, because the cold felt like the only thing in the world that was still telling her the truth. Bo lay down beside her and pressed the length of his body against her thigh. He did not move. He understood in the way only an animal can understand that there are kinds of grief a person must be allowed to sit inside without being asked to come out. After a long time, the eastern ridge began to lighten. Not warm yet, only gray, the color of the inside of a shell. Maren went into the workshop. She washed her face in a basin of cold well water. She put a kettle on the camp stove. She took Corbin Hale's letter from the workbench, and she sat on the cot with the letter in her lap, and she read it a 4th time, slowly looking at the shape of each sentence, the way a woman looks at a fabric she is going to have to sew with. Della's hands. A child named Wren. Pneumonia in a December that had been, as far as Maren could remember, no colder than any other December. Walter had not known. Walter had been 3 months from finishing the porch and finding Della alive in a small house in Knoxville and giving her a key to a house she would never get to walk into. Walter had died believing he still had time, and Della had died 4 years before him believing her father had stopped looking. And somewhere in the middle of that distance, a little girl had grown to 8 years old, asking about her grandparents. Into a silence none of them had known they were holding. Maren sat with this. She did not try to make peace with it. There was no peace to be made yet. There was only the cot and the cold mug, and the long sound of the kettle starting to whistle. She got up. She turned off the stove. She made tea. She sat at the workbench and she wrote a letter. Mr. Hale, my name is Maren Ashby. I am Della's mother. Thank you for writing me. I do not have the right words yet. I am 60 years old, and I have just finished laying a floor in a house my husband was building for the daughter we lost. And I have just learned this morning that I lost her in a way I did not know about. And I am writing this at 5 o'clock in the morning at a workbench he used to lean against, and I think I am still finding out how to be a person who knew this. Please tell Wren that her grandmother knows her name. Please tell her that her grandfather knew her in the way a man knows the people he is building a house for, even if he never met her. Please come. Bring her when you can. The house is not finished. It will be soon. I will write again in 3 days when my hands work better. Maren. She sealed it. She set it on the cot beside her so she would not forget to take it to Glenna's in the morning. Then she went out into the clearing in the grey light, and she stood on the porch she had laid yesterday afternoon, and she watched the sky over the eastern ridge turn from grey to the color of pearl to the color of a peach skin, and the morning light came down across the valley and across the pines and across the cedar boards under her feet, and she let it find her where she stood. She got back to work. She had a porch to floor and trim to install, and a front door to hang, and a kitchen sink that was still in its crate against the back wall of the living room. And she had a granddaughter coming. And she had decided in the dark of last night that the only honest thing left to do in this life was to finish what Walter had started. Not because he had wanted it for Della, but because there was a child 8 years old who had been asking a question and was going to get an answer. The porch floor went down in 3 days. She had learned the rhythm now. The cedar took the nails clean. She did the cuts on the table saw in the workshop, and she carried each board out and she laid it down and she nailed it through the tongue at the angle Elwyn had shown her, and her hands knew the work in a way they had not known anything 2 months ago. Tilda came on a Saturday with a length of copper pipe over her shoulder and a tool bag in her other hand. She did not knock. She walked into the bathroom and she said, "Today's the day we get you running water in this house." And she stayed until sundown. And she did not let Maren pay her. And she did not even let Maren cook her dinner, because she said she had a casserole at home that would not eat itself. And she drove off down the dirt drive in a truck that smelled like solder and pipe dope and rain. The kitchen sink went in the next week. Glenna sent her husband Hadley up to help with the heavy lift, and the two of them set the cast iron basin into the cabinet Walter had built for it. And when Maren turned the faucet on for the first time and watched the water run clear into a sink, her husband had measured to her height, because he had known even without saying that this was where she would stand someday. She did not cry. She only put her hand under the water and let it run between her fingers. The front door came on a Wednesday. It was leaning against the workshop wall when she came back from the post office that afternoon. Solid oak, 6 panels, the kind made before 1940. The brass knob was old but polished. The hinges were new. There was no note. There was never a note. She carried it inside the house with Elwyn's help the next morning, and they hung it in the frame Walter had set 9 years ago, and the door swung true on its hinges, and the latch caught on the first try. And Maren stood on the porch in the November sun and closed her own front door from the outside for the first time in her life. It was on a Friday in the 3rd week of November that Royce came back. She heard the truck before she saw it. And she did not stand up from where she was kneeling on the porch, driving the last nail of the railing into place. Bo lifted his head, but did not growl this time, which surprised her. She set the hammer down. She wiped her hands on her jeans. She stood up. The truck pulled into the clearing and stopped. Royce got out. He looked thinner than the last time. His coat was buttoned wrong. He was carrying something against his chest wrapped in a wool blanket. He stood at the bottom of the new porch steps, and he did not look up at her right away. "I'm not here to take anything." "All right." "Sheila left me 3 weeks ago. Said she'd been thinking about it for a year." "I'm sorry to hear that." "You don't have to be sorry." He stood there for a long moment. He looked at the porch railing she had just nailed in. He looked at the cedar siding. He looked at the front door. He shifted the blanket in his arms. "I sold most of what I took. The drill, the saw, the welding rig. I needed the rent. I'm not going to pretend I'm sorry the way a man's supposed to be sorry. I don't know how to do that. But I kept one thing back. I couldn't sell it. I tried. The man at the consignment place gave me a number and I drove home with it still in the truck. He pulled the blanket open. The walnut rocking chair. The one Walter had carved the summer Maren was pregnant. The one Royce had strapped to his trailer with a yellow ratchet that had left a mark across the headrest. He had sanded the mark out. He had refinished the wood. The grain caught the afternoon light the way Walter's hands had always made wood catch light. I wasn't sure I could bring it back. I drove up here twice last week and turned around at the bottom of the drive. I figured the third time I'd make it the rest of the way. Maren came down the porch steps. She walked across the gravel. She stopped in front of him. She did not say anything for a long time. She looked at the chair. She looked at her brother-in-law. She looked at the man who had stood in her garage on the third day after she became a widow and taken her husband's life apart piece by piece. She did not forgive him. Forgiveness was not a word a person could say in an afternoon. She said only, "There is a step coming loose on the workshop. Stay and fix it. You can sleep in the truck tonight or you can sleep on the workshop cot. Tomorrow you go home." Royce nodded once. He set the rocking chair on the porch as carefully as a man sets down something that does not belong to him. He fixed the step. He fixed two others she had not asked about. He slept on the workshop cot, and he was gone by the time the sun was fully up. The rocking chair stayed on the porch facing the eastern ridge. She rode to Corbin Hale a second time at the end of November, and a third time in early December, and by the second week of December, they had agreed on a Saturday 2 weeks later. He would drive Wren up from Knoxville. They would stay 2 nights at a small inn in Marshall that Glenna had called ahead for. They would come up to the house Saturday morning. Maren cleaned the house twice in the week leading up to it. She washed the pale yellow curtains. She polished the brass doorknob. She bought a small jar of honey at Glenna's store and set it on the kitchen counter beside 2 mugs and a tin of cocoa. She did not know what to expect. She did not know what a child of 8 looked like when she walked into a house her grandfather had built for her mother. She did not know what she would say. She practiced saying her own name out loud while she was painting the trim around the kitchen window. Corbin Hale's car came up the drive at 10 in the morning on the 3rd Saturday of December. The sky was the kind of pale that meant snow later. The pines were still. Bo heard the car before Maren did, and he sat down on the top porch step the way he had always sat to wait for Walter. The car stopped. The doors opened. Corbin was tall 32 with a careful face. He shook Maren's hand on the porch and he said, "Thank you for having us," in a voice that had been practicing the sentence since Knoxville. And from the back seat, a girl climbed out, 8 years old. Hair the color of acorns. She wore a green coat too big in the sleeves. She held a small wooden box against her chest with both hands. She looked up at the house. She looked at Maren. She looked at Bo on the porch step. And then she looked back at her grandmother. And she did not say anything, because she did not know yet how to start. Maren came down the steps slowly. She stopped 2 feet from the girl. She did not reach for her. She knelt down so they were at the same height. "You must be Wren." "Yes, ma'am. I am very glad you came." "Me too." Wren held the wooden box out toward her. It was small, the size of a paperback. The wood was the color of dark honey with a small carved leaf in the corner of the lid. Maren knew the carving. She had watched Walter make that mark on every piece of furniture he had built for 41 years. It was his signature. "My mom said this was supposed to come to you." Maren took the box. The lid was held shut by a small brass clasp. She looked at Corbin. He nodded once. She kept it under her bed. She told me when she was sick that it was a thing her dad had sent her when she was 16. She said when she was better, she was going to take it home. She did not get better. I gave it to Wren when she was old enough to understand. I think Wren has been waiting for you to open it. Maren opened the clasp. Inside the box on a small bed of dark green velvet was the thin gold band of her first wedding ring, the one Walter had bought her when they were 22 and broke. The one she had lost in 1996 and grieved for in a quiet way she had never told anyone about because it had felt foolish to grieve over a thing when there were so many other things to grieve. She had not lost it. Walter had found it. He had kept it. He had sent it to Della when she was 16 in some quiet act of reaching she had never known about. And Della had kept it for 9 more years. And Della had given it to a man she loved with instructions to give it to a child who was not yet old enough to understand. And the child had carried it up a mountain to a grandmother she had never met. Maren held the ring between her thumb and forefinger. The morning light came across the gravel and across the porch steps and across the small gold circle in her hand. Wren was watching her face. Grandma, yes, sweetheart. Who did Grandpa build this house for? Maren looked at her. She looked at the porch behind them. The cedar railing she had nailed in with her own hands. The front door swinging gently open in the breeze, the pale yellow curtains visible through the east window. She looked at the rocking chair Royce had brought back. She looked at the workshop with its robin's egg doors. She looked at Bo on the top step. She slid the gold ring onto the smallest finger of Wren's left hand. It was loose. It would not fit yet. The child would grow into it. Your grandfather built this house for whoever was going to need a place to come home to. He started it 9 years ago. He thought it would be for your mother. He did not know about you, but the house knew. The house was waiting. Wren looked at the ring on her finger. She looked up at the house. She looked at her grandmother. Can we go inside? Yes, come on, there is cocoa on the stove. Your father can come too. They walked up the porch steps together. Bo got up and led them to the door. Maren opened it and held it for the child and the man and the dog. And she came in last and she closed the door behind her with the soft solid sound of a latch that had been hung true. That night, after Corbin and Wren had driven back to the inn in Marshall, Maren sat at the kitchen table with the leather notebook open in front of her. The lantern was lit. Bo was asleep on the rug. The wind moved through the pines outside and the first thin snow of December was falling against the east window. She turned to the last blank page. She picked up the pencil she had been using for 2 months now. She wrote slowly in her own rounder hand beneath the last entry Walter had ever made. December 20th. House is finished. Wren came. She is the one it was for Walter. The house knew. Bo knew. I think you knew too in the way you knew everything. I am going to keep writing in this book. There will be more to tell you. She closed the notebook. She set it on the shelf above the workbench next to a small framed photograph she had brought up from Asheville last week. Walter at 24 on the courthouse steps with the carnation in his lapel. She turned the lantern down. In the bedroom, she got into bed under a quilt Glenna had given her. The pale yellow curtains moved softly at the east window. Outside, the snow was coming down through the pines in the lantern light from the workshop, and the eastern ridge was a low dark line against a sky the color of a banked fire. Bo jumped up and lay across her feet. Maren closed her eyes. In the morning, the light would come. It would come up over the ridge and across the valley, and through the pale yellow cotton at the window, and across the floor she had laid herself. And it would find her where she slept, and it would wake her gently the way a hand on the shoulder wakes someone you love. the way it had always been meant to. If somewhere in your life there is a person who built something quiet for you, a person who never asked for credit and may never have lived to see you find it, or if you are the person who is still building something now in a workshop nobody else has been to, yet we would be honored if you told us about it in the comments. We read every one. Stay with us for more stories like this one. Sleep well tonight. The morning light is coming.